The moon was a perfect silver disk, suspended high above the ruins of the old stage. Ivy curled around the broken columns like reaching fingers, and the scent of jasmine drifted through the warm night air. Beneath that sacred light, a figure appeared, slight, delicate, cloaked in flowing black that moved as if stirred by something more than wind. She stepped forward with a grace that defied the human body, each motion a whisper, each turn a question that echoed in the watching hearts of those gathered. The audience had no name. They were townsfolk, nobles, beggars, wanderers. Drawn not by invitation but instinct. Some swore they'd been compelled to come, waking from their beds and walking through the woods as if sleepwalking. Others claimed to have followed the whisper of a song they couldn't forget. None could say how they arrived, only that now they were here. And once they saw her they could not look away. She danced without music, yet every gesture summoned melody. A tilt of her head carried the quiet pluck of strings. A leap into the air brought the thunder of drums. Her body painted silence into something symphonic. She did not smile, and yet her face glowed with something beyond joy, something holy and haunted. There was no sound of footsteps. No patter of skin on stone. Her form spun in impossible circles, sometimes pausing mid-air as if the rules of gravity bent to her will. Children clutched their mothers' skirts. Old men took off their hats. Lovers held their breath. And still no one saw her feet. The moon caught her silhouette, turning her into a moving shadow on the stone. But even her shadow danced differently, elongated, alive, a second spirit. When she twirled, the shadow twirled slightly behind her like a partner catching up. It wasn't imitation. It was communion. Her movements belonged to something more ancient than muscle or tendon. She moved not just with her body but with everything that had ever been broken in her. A child whispered, "She doesn't have feet." A man beside him whispered back, "She doesn't need them." The crowd grew denser as the night deepened, people standing in the trees, peering from behind moss-covered pillars, some perched on broken statues. All were silent. All were spellbound. A breeze stirred, though no leaves moved. She danced faster now, a blur of midnight and motion, her robes sweeping the ground like ink spilled on parchment. Her arms drew patterns in the air, spirals, loops, sharp cuts through invisible threads. It felt like she was stitching the night together, repairing a tear only she could see. And then came the laughter. Soft at first like water flowing over smooth rock. Then louder, rippling through the clearing, weightless and strange, the kind of sound that made one shiver despite the warmth. It was not joy, not quite madness, something between. A sound born from knowing pain so deeply it could no longer hold you hostage. A woman in the crowd gasped, clutching her mouth. "It's her," she whispered. "It's the girl. The one from the fire. The one from the cellar." Others murmured the same. Whispers passed like wildfire. Saren. The stepdaughter. The cursed dancer. The girl with no toes. They remembered now, the tale that had become legend then ghost story. The girl whose stepmother had punished her for defiance. The girl who bled on the stone floor while no one came to save her. The girl who vanished into the night, barefoot and broken. Yet here she was. No blood now. No agony. Only grace. Her body slowed, reaching the final arc of motion. One last pirouette that sent her robes spiraling outward like a storm. She landed in a bow, head down, arms extended, shadow curled beneath her like a silent lover. The clearing fell into a silence so complete it hummed. Then she raised her head. Her eyes shone not with tears but with memory. Scars traced her arms like faint silver etchings, each one a line in her unfinished story. She looked not at the crowd but beyond them as if seeing something on the other side of time. No one dared move. No one dared speak. She took one slow step forward, the shadow behind her echoing perfectly, and then another. She stopped at the edge of the circle where the moonlight met darkness and turned to face them. A hush stretched, delicate as silk. Then she said, voice quiet but sharp as shattered glass, "You took my toes but not my soul." The crowd didn't breathe. She stepped backward into the dark, and the moon dimmed as if in mourning. Her figure faded into the trees, a whisper returning to the wind. No applause followed. No cheers. Only silence, and the knowledge that they had seen something not meant for this world. The last dance. The house was named for its fireplace, though no warmth had ever come from it. The hearth stood blackened and unused, filled with cold ash that never got swept. The walls were gray with years of soot and smoke. Even the curtains drooped like mourning veils, permanently stained by rain and rot. In the village it was called the Ash House, and those who lived there were spoken of in hushed tones. Saren had long since grown used to the smell, damp stone, stale bread, and something faintly sour like boiled linen. She learned to tiptoe across the creaky wooden floors to avoid waking Lady Myra before dawn. Every morning she lit the stove, fed the chickens, chopped roots for stew, and fetched water from the creek, her bare feet numbed by frost in winter and baked by dirt in summer. Her stepmother insisted shoes were a luxury and had better use in town markets where buyers saw value in appearances. Lady Myra rarely touched Saren except to shove her or slap her hand away. She preferred commands barked from the top of the staircase while seated in her upholstered chair, wrapped in a velvet robe she had worn threadbare. Her hair was always tied back so tightly it pulled the corners of her face upward, as if she were trying to hold on to beauty by force. Her daughters, Mirren and Lisa, were copies of her, though less refined. They sneered with youth and snarled with envy, always careful to stay close enough to their mother to share in her cruelty. Saren, by contrast, had an odd stillness about her. Her eyes didn't dart. Her hands didn't fidget. Her limbs held a kind of silence that felt unnatural in the loud, stifling house. She listened more than she spoke, but there was a weight to her presence that unsettled the other girls. When she moved, it was with an elegance that mocked their stiffness. When she walked, it was as though her feet barely touched the ground. Lady Myra hated that most of all. "Keep your chin down when you walk," she once snapped at Saren. "No one likes a girl who floats." It wasn't the floating she hated, not truly. It was what it reminded her of. Her, the one whose name no longer got spoken inside the house. Saren's mother. Some said she had been the finest dancer the kingdom had ever known. They said she could make men weep and women ache with the way her arms told stories. That when she danced she didn't just perform, she invoked. People traveled for miles to see her. But she disappeared the night of the Harvest Moon Festival, never seen again. Some whispered she'd fallen into madness and wandered into the marsh. Others said she'd been taken by spirits too envious of her talent. Lady Myra claimed she'd run away with a man. "A weak woman with weak morals," she told Saren again and again. Nothing worth remembering. But Saren remembered her. Not through stories, none were told in the ash house, but through dreams. Dreams of soft hands and candlelight. The scent of wild roses and chalk. The hum of a lullaby wrapped in rhythm. Sometimes Saren woke with tears in her eyes, the echo of a dance still in her limbs. Other times she woke in the cellar, unsure how she got there, her body sore and her feet blackened with dirt. She danced when no one watched. In the fields behind the house, where the grass grew tall and wild. In the narrow stretch of moonlight that fell through the attic window. And most often, in the cellar, the one place even Lady Myra avoided. It smelled of mildew and old coal, but the stone floor was flat, and the dust was thick enough to record her movements. She'd step into the dark, count to 8 and let her soul rise. Each night her body grew bolder, faster, clearer. She no longer danced like a child pretending to be a swan. She danced like a swan remembering it had once been human. The cellar became her sanctuary. There she wasn't a servant or a burden or a girl with no shoes. She was grace. She was power. She was the daughter of a woman who had once made the world stop spinning for the sake of beauty. But secrets don't stay secrets in houses filled with malice. One evening Mirren followed her. She had always been jealous of Saren's silence, twisting it into arrogance in her mind. When she peeked through the cellar door and saw Saren gliding across the stone, arms extended, legs lifted in an arc, the envy twisted into something venomous. She didn't confront her. She waited. She watched until Saren collapsed into a bow, breathless, sweat-slicked, and smiling. Then she ran to tell their mother. At dinner Lady Myra said nothing. She only watched. Saren felt it in her skin, that still, sharp attention. When the meal was done Lady Myra said, "Fetch more firewood," and when Saren returned from the woodshed, her attic door was wide open. Her belongings scattered. Her few treasures, a ribbon, a carved wooden flute, a scrap of old silk, were gone. "You've been practicing witchcraft," Lady Myra said from the stairs, voice cold and amused. "I was only dancing," Saren whispered. Lady Myra's eyes narrowed. Only? Dancing invites the devil. Pride invites his hand. Do you want to end up like your mother, drowned, vanished, mad? "I don't believe she ran," Saren said before she could stop herself. Lady Myra descended the stairs step by step. No. She danced until the world took her. That's what happens to girls who forget their place. The house seemed to hold its breath. From then on, Saren was watched more closely. Her steps were questioned. Her chores doubled. The cellar door was locked. But when no one was around she still moved, even if only in her mind. She rehearsed the turns while stirring soup. She pictured her arms gliding while folding linens. Every shadow became a partner, every breeze a rhythm. The more they tried to crush it, the more the dance found new places to live. One evening, Saren passed a group of traveling merchants on the road. One of them, a hunched old woman with coins braided into her hair, stopped her. "You've got her walk," she said. Saren paused. "Whose?" The old woman smiled. "The ghost dancer. The one who vanished." Then she whispered, "You've got her shadow too." Saren didn't understand then. But something inside her stirred. The ash in the fireplace shifted. The cellar door creaked in its hinges. And far beneath the house, a rhythm began to tap again. The attic groaned under the weight of time. Its door, once sealed with rusted hinges and a lock that bit into the wood, had given way after a sudden storm rocked the ash house one night. A branch had struck the roof, fracturing tiles and loosening the seal. Saren climbed the ladder to check for damage, and when she pulled herself up into the dust-thick air, something shifted under her hand, a hollow thud against the far wall. It wasn't the wall. It was a door. For a long moment she just stared at it, heart thudding in her ears. The attic had always felt wrong to her, colder than the rest of the house despite the rising heat of summer. She crept across warped floorboards, each step stirring motes of dust that sparkled in the shafts of fading daylight. She reached for the door and pulled. It stuck, then gave way with a reluctant sigh. Inside was a small room barely larger than a wardrobe. Its walls were lined with faded curtains, draped over mirrors long tarnished. The scent of old perfume lingered, wrapped in the dry decay of paper and silk. A single window, cracked but unbroken, filtered in thin moonlight. On a low wooden stool rested a pair of shoes, delicate, ruined. Ballet slippers, their ribbons frayed, soles blackened with ash. One was slashed across the toe. The other bore a dried stain the color of old blood. Saren sank to her knees, reaching out with shaking hands. The shoes were soft with age, but something about them pulsed faintly beneath her fingertips, like breath. She cradled them in her lap and wept, though she didn't fully know why. They weren't just shoes. They were memory. Proof. They had been here all along. Beside the stool was a bundle wrapped in velvet, letters bound in faded twine and a journal with a cracked leather spine. Saren opened it, half expecting the pages to crumble in her hands. But they held. And they sang. The handwriting was precise, elegant, a dancer's script. The journal spoke of performances in far-off cities, of fear before the stage and euphoria after. But soon the entries turned. Her mother wrote of the way shadows seemed to move with her. How they echoed her steps too perfectly. How the audience's eyes grew wide not from awe, but from something deeper. Unease. Recognition. Then came the final entries, ones filled with trembling ink and hasty sketches. Diagrams of poses with strange symbols etched beside them. Circles drawn in chalk. Lines about rhythms only the body could hear. One phrase repeated over and over. Dance into the shadow and the shadow dances back. Saren read every word. She traced the drawings with her fingertips and whispered the sequences to herself in the dark. That night, long after the house had fallen into sleep, she returned to the hidden room, cleared the center of the floor and stood barefoot before the window. She began with the poses she knew, first position, plie, arabesque. But then she added the gestures from the journal, strange and angular. Her arms bent like wings folding inward. Her back curved into a spiral. She rotated her wrists in time with breathless counts. 1 2 3 1 2 3 4. Her body moved, then paused, then moved again, and with each shift something else moved too. Her shadow. It no longer followed like a flat copy. It anticipated her. Her silhouette flickered slightly ahead of her real limbs, turning before she turned, raising its arms while hers were still halfway there. It moved as if it knew the steps better than she did. Saren's breath caught in her throat, but she kept dancing. She felt the air around her change, grow charged, humming. Like the moment before a storm breaks. Her limbs grew lighter, her thoughts sharper. She felt alive in a way she never had. More than alive. Where? When she stopped, she stumbled. Her legs trembled. Her heart pounded in her throat. She looked down at her shadow, still. Ordinary. Then she looked in the mirror on the far wall, and for a split second she saw something behind her. A second figure. A woman cloaked in lightless grace, watching. She blinked and it was gone. From then on she practiced in secret. By day she chopped roots and swept floors. By night she slipped into the hidden room and danced. Every movement became a key. Every step unlocked something deeper. Her body no longer resisted, it welcomed the rhythm. Her balance grew sharper. Her pain, even from walking barefoot on splintered boards, began to fade into a distant echo. The attic itself changed, less dust, more warmth. The air seemed to shimmer when she moved. Her reflection in the mirror grew clearer, more assured. But secrets have a weight. And the ash house was full of listening. Mirren grew suspicious. She noticed Saren's eyes carried a strange light in the mornings. She noticed her steps no longer dragged with exhaustion. She followed her one night, tiptoeing up the ladder, careful to keep to the dark. What she saw chilled her. Her stepsister twirling alone in a room that had no candlelight, yet glowed. Her arms drawing shapes in the air that pulsed. Her shadow moving with a life of its own. Mirren's breath caught. She stepped back too hard. A floorboard cracked. Saren froze mid-step. "Who's there?" Her voice rang, sharper than expected. Mirren bolted down the ladder and out into the hallway, heart racing. The next morning the house was colder. Lady Myra's tone sharper than knives. She didn't confront Saren outright. She didn't scream or strike. Instead she smiled, a slow triumphant smile, and asked Saren to scrub the cellar stairs. The trap was set. That evening Lady Myra unlocked the attic herself, entered the hidden room and found the slippers, the journal, the mirror. She touched none of it, only looked. Then she ordered the door nailed shut. At supper she leaned back in her chair and said, "My daughters have always been honest. Loyal. Unlike some." Saren didn't reply. She knew. The knowledge curled in her stomach like smoke. "You've been playing with things you don't understand," Lady Myra continued, her voice silky with malice. "But shadows lie. They flatter. They take." "I didn't do anything wrong," Saren said quietly. Lady Myra's smile widened. "No. Not yet." She stood, slow and deliberate. "But you will." The morning of the punishment arrived cloaked in fog, as if the world itself recoiled from what was to come. Bells from the village chapel tolled not for celebration or worship, but to summon the people for judgment. Word had spread in whispers carried through taverns and between cracked shutters. The girl from the ash house was to be tried. Lady Myra stood in the square draped in mourning black, a sheer veil over her face. She played her role to perfection, the grieving stepmother, deeply wounded by the betrayal of a wayward girl who had consorted with darkness. Beside her stood Mirren and Lisa, expressions carefully schooled into sorrow, though their eyes sparkled with triumph. Saren was dragged into the square by two of the constable's men, barefoot and pale, her hair tangled, her wrists bound in rope. She hadn't spoken since the night they'd come for her, hadn't screamed or begged. She'd only looked once toward the attic as they led her away. The silence was more haunting than any cry would have been. The crowd gathered quickly. Men muttered prayers. Mothers clutched their children. Old women whispered of omens and old tales. Some crossed themselves as she passed, while others spat at the dirt near her feet. It didn't matter that no one had seen her dance with the shadows. Lady Myra's word carried weight, and the town was built on fear. Lady Myra raised her hand, and the murmuring fell away. "This girl," she said, her voice clear and cold, "was born of dangerous blood. Her mother bewitched men with her dancing, turned heads, stirred sin. And now her daughter follows the same cursed path." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The priest nodded somberly. "I found her in the attic," Myra continued, surrounded by relics of wickedness. Books of unnatural symbols. Shoes tainted by sorcery. And I have witnesses, my own daughters, who saw her dancing in communion with something unholy. Mirren stepped forward, a single tear tracing her cheek. "She wasn't alone," she said softly. Her shadow moved, like it was alive. That was all it took. Lady Myra turned to the village blacksmith, a wide man with soot permanently embedded in the lines of his face. "We cannot burn her, she is still of our household," she declared. "But she must be punished. Vanity must be humbled. The feet that summon darkness must be silenced." The blacksmith hesitated. "My lady." "She dances no more," Myra said. "Do it." The silence that followed stretched impossibly long. Saren stood in the middle of the square, eyes distant, hands trembling. Her body refused to move, as though not fully believing what was about to happen. Two villagers stepped forward. One knelt and held her legs. The other brought forth a low stool and forced her down. Then the blacksmith stepped in. He avoided her gaze. "I'm sorry, girl," he whispered, but he did not stop. A single blow. Then another. The sound was not what people expected. It was not a scream. It was not metal on flesh. It was the dull, wet sound of something essential being taken. It echoed down the alleyways. Some turned away. A few sobbed. But no one intervened. Saren didn't cry. Her face turned skyward, teeth clenched. Her breath came in shallow gasps, but her eyes never shut. She stared at the clouds as if memorizing them. When it was done, they bound her feet and dragged her back to the ash house. The cellar door had been cleared and relocked. They shoved her inside, slammed it shut, and nailed it from the outside. No one brought food. No one brought water. The town pretended she had never existed. 4 days she drifted in and out of darkness. Fevered dreams twisted time. She saw her mother's face reflected in the puddles on the cellar floor. She heard music where there was none. Her toes throbbed with an absence that became louder than pain, a silence so deep it howled. She couldn't walk, couldn't stand. But in her mind she danced. Not with her body. With memory. With rhythm. With fury. The first movement was small. A flex of her ankle. Then the twitch of a calf muscle. Her feet betrayed her, but her legs remembered. Her arms stirred. Her spine arched. Even in pain, her body knew the rhythm, the strange ritual her mother had written about. The steps etched into her soul, passed down like a secret inheritance. At night, the cellar filled with shadows. Not just from the flicker of moonlight through the slats, but deeper ones, shadows that didn't match any object. They moved differently. They crept along the ceiling, curled around the corners. One night, she saw a shape take form, long-limbed, graceful. Familiar. The woman from the mirror. She wasn't solid. She flickered like candlelight, but her eyes held sorrow, and something fiercer beneath it. Pride. Fury. Saren watched her move. She watched her raise her arms, tilt her head, beckon. Dance. But Saren couldn't rise. Her legs trembled beneath her. Her balance was gone. Her pain was raw and constant. Still the woman moved. And Saren followed, in her mind at first. Then with her hands. Then her arms. Her legs shifted, dragging through the filth. Her breath caught. Her body cried out, but still she moved. She danced. The pain didn't vanish. But it changed. It became something burning and bright. It hollowed her out and filled her anew. Each gesture stitched her together. Each sway rebuilt her from the inside. Her feet would never be whole, but something else was rising in their place. Outside, the world kept turning. Lady Myra declared the house cleansed. Mirren and Lisa wore white and claimed virtue. The townsfolk avoided the ash house, crossing the road to pass by. And below, in the dark, Saren learned the truth. The dance was never in the feet. It was in the will. In the wound. In the shadow that remembered everything. The attic was no longer sealed. The storm that had cracked it open the first time returned with a vengeance. It rattled the ash house to its bones, tearing loose tiles and snapping old beams. Rain seeped through the ceiling, trickling down the walls. Thunder growled like a warning too ancient to name. In the chaos, no one noticed the attic door swing open again. They'd moved Saren there in secret days ago, when the fever had grown too wild to hide. Mirren and Lisa had wanted her buried, but Lady Myra said, let her rot where her mother danced. The attic, still filled with ghost dust and forgotten silk, became a sickroom, or a tomb. They left her with a single blanket and a cracked pitcher of water, as if that would be enough. Saren lay motionless, half buried in the folds of old gowns, her body weightless with sickness. Her skin was pale and slick. Her feet, or what was left of them, were bandaged in linen long soaked through. Each breath was a flutter barely there. She dreamed. Or hallucinated. Or perhaps she wandered somewhere else entirely. In her dream, she stood barefoot in a vast black field, stars blooming like fireflies overhead. The ground was soft beneath her, not grass, not soil, but something more like velvet shadow. She could see her toes, whole and unbroken. She flexed them. They obeyed. No pain. No blood. Only memory. A figure emerged from the dark. Not walking but unfolding, like smoke turning into bone. It was her mother. Not the pale, wilted woman from old portraits, but tall and strong, her limbs long and flowing, her eyes endless wells of dark light. You remembered, she said, her voice a breeze through leaves. Saren tried to speak, but no words came. Only breath. You felt it, her mother continued. The rhythm. The return. The truth of what you are. Pause. And what they did. Saren's throat tightened. She looked down at her feet, at her perfect shadow self, then at her mother again. They took from me, she whispered finally. They tried, the woman said. But they failed. The sky above them pulsed, not with clouds or lightning but with echoes. Steps. Twirls. 1,000 dancers long forgotten, spinning in slow arcs across the sky. Each one a streak of memory. Pain bent into grace. Do you see? Her mother asked. The body ends. The soul continues. Saren stepped forward. Her mother matched her. They danced together, slow and strange, each step carving shapes in the dark. The shadow beneath them pulsed, brighter than light. Movement lives in the soul, her mother whispered. And shadows remember steps no body can make. Saren felt it then, in her chest, her spine, her arms. Not movement of muscle but memory. Legacy. She moved through it as if through water. Each gesture wove her into something bigger than pain, older than fear. She felt her heartbeat sink with a deeper rhythm. Not just hers, a chorus. A lineage. You are not broken, her mother said. You are begun. Saren reached out. Her fingertips met shadow. They passed through and lit. Then she awoke. The fever hadn't broken but the chill was gone. She was soaked in sweat but her breath was steady. The attic was utterly silent. The dust hung still in the air like it had paused to listen. Then a creak. A sigh. A pull. The attic window, long jammed shut, opened on its own. Wind poured in, not cold but full of breath, full of scent, full of sound. It swept through the room, scattering pages and silk, lifting her hair like hands. It didn't roar. It whispered. Saren's fingers twitched. Her arms stirred. The wind gathered at her back, pushing against her gently. She rose to one elbow, then to her knees. Pain burned through her legs, but it was distant, not all-encompassing. Her body protested, but didn't stop. She stood. She stood. The pressure in the room changed. Shadows stretched across the floor, bending toward her like worshippers. Her own shadow elongated, widened, then split, and danced. It moved with impossible precision. Grace that mocked physics. Steps no foot could make. Saren didn't walk. She didn't need to. Her body swayed and her shadow responded. When she lifted her arms, her silhouette lifted higher. When she turned her head, it spun fully. She was two now, body and soul. And she finally understood what her mother meant. The body was the drum. The soul was the song. And the shadow? The echo that never faded. The window slammed open wider. The sky beyond it boiled with cloud. Far below, the village slept, unaware. Saren stepped toward the edge. Not to fall. To begin. Midnight arrived like a held breath. The world was quiet, the kind of silence that hummed. Even the wind had stilled, waiting for something older than sound. The village below lay shrouded in darkness, hearts long extinguished, dreams stirring behind shuttered windows. But above, in the attic of the ash house, something ancient was waking. Saren sat upright in the shadows. She no longer trembled. Her fever was gone, replaced by a lucidity so sharp it felt like glass inside her chest. Her breath came slow and steady, as if timed to a beat only she could hear. The pain in her feet was still there, the throb, the absence, but it no longer ruled her. It was now merely a note in a greater symphony. The moonlight streamed in through the wide-open attic window, casting a glowing silver square across the floor. The room, cluttered with relics and ruins of her mother's life, glowed like the inside of a music box. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed. Her bandages were stiff, stained. Her legs had grown leaner, the muscles sharpened by pain and disuse. She could not feel her toes, because they weren't there. The truth of that had once shattered her. Now it felt distant, even irrelevant. She rose. She didn't fall. Something beneath her steadied her. It wasn't the floor. It wasn't her muscles. It was her shadow. Cast long and dark beneath the moonlight, it moved, subtly then with confidence. As she stepped forward, limping, uncertain, her shadow surged ahead, gliding across the wooden floor. It danced, with elegance, with memory, with fury. And Saren followed. Not with her broken feet, but with her whole soul. Each movement became a dialogue, body asking, shadow answering. She raised her arms and her silhouette stretched toward the rafters. She turned her head, and the shadow spun like a ribbon. Her fingers fluttered, and the air around her stirred with unseen energy, as if reality itself remembered the shape of her. She moved again and the attic transformed. The edges blurred. Time slowed. The walls faded into mist. The dust lifted into spirals and hovered mid-air like frozen breath. The moonlight grew brighter, sharper. Not cold but alive. She danced on. Her arms swept through the air like wings. Her back arched, her chest lifted, and though her feet barely touched the wood, her presence filled the room like music. Her shadow pirouette, split, multiplied, now a trio, now a dozen, all perfect, all graceful, all echoing forgotten steps. She danced the pain of her punishment, a sharp, angular movement, slicing the air like knives. She danced her solitude, slow, aching with a tremble in every breath. She danced her defiance, shoulders square, gaze unbroken, steps that pulsed with thunder. She danced her mother's memory, light, fluid, eternal. And when she danced the ritual, the one her mother had etched in the journal, the one that had waited generations to be completed, the room shifted again. Shadows bloomed along the walls. Not darkness, not absence, but presence. Figures rose, tall and flickering, shaped from memory. Dancers of old. Their faces were obscured, but their movements were unmistakable. Those who had danced despite silence, despite violence, despite being forgotten. They had danced before Saren was born. Before her mother. Before the ash house was ever built. One by one they circled her. Their shadows joined hers, weaving into a tapestry of movement. Steps layered upon steps. Arms extended toward the heavens, then toward her. She mirrored them. She was not learning now, she was remembering. The steps were hers. They always had been. Her body moved in ways it never had before, floating, turning, balancing not on her feet but on the intent of motion itself. Her legs bent and straightened like waves. Her arms rode in the air. Her shadow expanded, stretched across the ceiling, the walls, out the window and onto the roof. Outside the sky changed. Clouds parted with reverence. Stars gleamed through the gaps. The moon flared brighter. Its light poured into the attic, illuminating everything. The ash-streaked floorboards, the torn gowns, the broken glass, all glowed as if baptized. Saren opened her mouth and sang without sound. It wasn't a melody. It was a vibration, a resonance that made the dust swirl and the rafters tremble. The shadows responded, harmonizing in motion. Their limbs bent in impossible arcs. Their feet tapped against nothing. Their rhythm was not bound to earth. And then, silence again. The shadows froze. Saren stood still, her hands raised like wings mid-flap. Her shadow pulsed once, twice, then stepped away from her. It turned to face her. And bowed. She bowed in return. The ritual was complete. In that instant, Saren understood everything. Her mother had not merely danced, she had opened. Every movement, every routine had been a door to something deeper. A calling to an old force, not evil, not good, but truthful. The kind of magic that didn't live in spells or potions, but in defiance, in beauty, in the assertion of self against all who would silence it. The dance was not vanity. It was resistance. And now it lived in her. The attic dimmed as the moon passed deeper into the sky. The dancers faded, their silhouettes bowing before slipping back into the walls, into memory. Saren stood alone, her breathing calm, her eyes wide open. She looked down. Her feet were bleeding again, soaked through the bandages. Flesh torn from pressure and movement. The pain returned, but it no longer ruled her. She had danced beyond it. She had danced through it. She walked, limping, slow, to the attic window. The village lay quiet. But something had shifted. She saw the chapel steeple tilt slightly, the weather vane turned in a direction no wind had chosen. She saw the square where her blood had once stained the cobbles now filled with mist that refused to dissipate. She saw the ash house shadow stretching farther than it ever had before, curling toward the forest like a beckoning hand. The night was no longer silent. It whispered her name. And the shadows listened. Once every 10 years the capital city shed its gloom and swelled with light. The festival of grace arrived not with a trumpet but with petals, thousands of them, falling from unseen places, scenting the streets like memory. Lanterns burned gold along every archway. Silks shimmered from balconies. Music echoed from towers at dawn and didn't stop until stars blurred from exhaustion. This was no mere celebration. It was a choosing, the royal court's sacred search for the next court performer. Not just an artist but a soul woven into the kingdom's myth. A bearer of beauty, chosen to inspire and endure. It was said the court performer held more power than generals, because what they stirred in the heart could not be undone. For weeks, the city had swelled with visitors. Dancers, singers, actors, storytellers, all desperate to be seen, to be remembered. The competition had drawn dozens of hopefuls, each more dazzling than the last. And then the veiled woman appeared. Her name wasn't on the original list. She arrived the night before the final performance, veiled in black, a thin figure with a silent step. No one saw her face. She spoke to no one. Her entry, ensigned and strange, was written in old ink on parchment that smelled of smoke and roses. The courtiers scoffed, but curiosity has always been the twin of power. The judges allowed her name to remain. A shadow dancer, someone whispered. A widow. A ghost. By morning rumors spun like vines. In a gilded pavilion at the edge of the palace gardens, the contestants waited their turn. Saren, cloaked in darkness, her face hidden by a sheer black veil, stood apart. Her breathing was calm. Her limbs quiet. Her feet, bound in silk wrappings, throbbed. She felt every pulse, but she did not flinch. She'd walked for days to reach this place. Not always on her feet. Sometimes carried by strangers who never asked questions. Sometimes floating, borne by wind and instinct. Her stepmother and stepsisters arrived before noon, dressed in layered silks, fanning themselves dramatically. "I hear they're letting commoners in now," Mirren sneered. "The girl from the valley is dancing," said Lisa. "The one with the golden hair. She might be tolerable." "No one will outshine you," Lady Myra said with poisoned sweetness. "You're born for stages." They did not recognize Saren. Even when her name was announced, the dancer in shadow, they laughed, assuming it a pretentious moniker from some impoverished noble child. The pavilion darkened as her name echoed across the garden. Lanterns dimmed. Clouds passed over the sun. A hush fell. Then she entered. She wore no jewels. No bright silks. Only a flowing black dress, stitched with thread so fine it shimmered only when she moved. Her veil caught the light, not hiding her but refracting her like water. The moment she stepped onto the marble stage, something shifted. The garden, so lively and bright, fell into stillness. Her shadow spilled before her, long, sharp, precise. The music began, a single low note held impossibly long. She moved, and the world followed. The first steps were simple. A bow of the head, a raise of the arms. But there was weight in it, sorrow, yearning, dignity. Her body bent like a reed. Her arms became wings. Her feet, though hidden by the folds of her gown, glided across the floor without sound. Her shadow spun and rose, detached from physics, from expectation. Gasps rose from the crowd. She twirled, once, twice, faster, and the veil shimmered like stormlight. Her shadow multiplied, echoing behind her in perfect synchronization. Each motion carved silence into form. By the second phrase of the music, the garden was breathless. By the third, people were weeping. Lady Myra stiffened in her chair. Something about the dancer's shape, the tilt of the head, the curve of the shoulder, was too familiar. The way she moved was haunting. It wasn't just talent. It was memory. "Who is she?" Lisa asked in a whisper. No one answered. Saren danced now not as a person but as presence. She danced the cellar where she first spun in secret. She danced the fields where she mimicked birds. She danced the attic where she bled. She danced the moment her shadow rose for the first time. And in the final movement, delicate, infinite, she danced the moment she rose again. She ended in stillness. Arms lifted. Head bowed. Shadow bowed too. Silence. Then a single clap. Then another. Then the sound of everyone standing at once. Thunderous applause crashed across the garden. People shouted. What? Reached forward as if hoping to catch the final trace of her motion. But she was already leaving. She turned, walking with that same impossible grace, and exited into shadow. Before anyone could stop her. Lady Myra sat frozen. Mirren looked pale. Lisa whispered, "I think I know," but no one moved. In the hours that followed, judges tried to find her. Pages searched. Servants asked every inn, every alley. She was gone. All that remained was a single silk ribbon left on the stage, black with a thread of silver, tied into a knot none could undo. The name, Dancer in Shadow, was etched in gold that evening on the festival's ledger. Though she had not claimed the prize, it was decided, no one would follow her. To do so would be to ruin perfection. And so she became legend. A phantom who danced not on feet but on memory. Once every 10 years, the capital city shed its gloom and swelled with light. The festival of grace arrived not with a trumpet but with petals, thousands of them, falling from unseen places, scenting the streets like memory. Lanterns burned gold along every archway. Silks shimmered from balconies. Music echoed from towers at dawn and didn't stop until stars blurred from exhaustion. This was no mere celebration. It was a choosing, the royal court's sacred search for the next court performer. Not just an artist but a soul woven into the kingdom's myth. A bearer of beauty, chosen to inspire and endure. It was said the court performer held more power than generals, because what they stirred in the heart could not be undone. For weeks, the city had swelled with visitors. Dancers, singers, actors, storytellers, all desperate to be seen, to be remembered. The competition had drawn dozens of hopefuls, each more dazzling than the last. And then the veiled woman appeared. Her name wasn't on the original list. She arrived the night before the final performance, veiled in black, a thin figure with a silent step. No one saw her face. She spoke to no one. Her entry, unsigned and strange, was written in old ink on parchment that smelled of smoke and roses. The courtiers scoffed, but curiosity has always been the twin of power. The judges allowed her name to remain. A shadow dancer, someone whispered. A widow. A ghost. By morning, rumors spun like vines. In a gilded pavilion at the edge of the palace gardens, the contestants waited their turn. Saren, cloaked in darkness, her face hidden by a sheer black veil, stood apart. Her breathing was calm. Her limbs quiet. Her feet, bound in silk wrappings, throbbed. She felt every pulse, but she did not flinch. She'd walked for days to reach this place. Not always on her feet. Sometimes carried by strangers who never asked questions. Sometimes floating, borne by wind and instinct. Her stepmother and stepsisters arrived before noon, dressed in layered silks, fanning themselves dramatically. I hear they're letting commoners in now, Mirren sneered. The girl from the valley is dancing, said Lisa. The one with the golden hair. She might be tolerable. No one will outshine you, Lady Myra said with poisoned sweetness. You're born for stages. They did not recognize Saren. Even when her name was announced, the dancer in shadow, they laughed, assuming it a pretentious moniker from some impoverished noble child. The pavilion darkened as her name echoed across the garden. Lanterns dimmed. Clouds passed over the sun. A hush fell. Then she entered. She wore no jewels. No bright silks. Only a flowing black dress, stitched with thread so fine it shimmered only when she moved. Her veil caught the light, not hiding her but refracting her like water. The moment she stepped onto the marble stage, something shifted. The garden, so lively and bright, fell into stillness. Her shadow spilled before her, long, sharp, precise. The music began, a single low note held impossibly long. She moved, and the world followed. The first steps were simple. A bow of the head. A raise of the arms. But there was weight in it, sorrow, yearning, dignity. Her body bent like a reed. Her arms became wings. Her feet, though hidden by the folds of her gown, glided across the floor without sound. Her shadow spun and rose, detached from physics, from expectation. Gasps rose from the crowd. She twirled, once, twice, faster, and the veil shimmered like stormlight. Her shadow multiplied, echoing behind her in perfect synchronization. Each motion carved silence into form. By the second phrase of the music, the garden was breathless. By the third, people were weeping. Lady Myra stiffened in her chair. Something about the dancer's shape, the tilt of the head, the curve of the shoulder, was too familiar. The way she moved was haunting. It wasn't just talent. It was memory. Who is she? Lisa asked in a whisper. No one answered. Saren danced now not as a person but as presence. She danced the cellar where she first spun in secret. She danced the fields where she mimicked birds. She danced the attic where she bled. She danced the moment her shadow rose for the first time. And in the final movement, delicate, infinite, she danced the moment she rose again. She ended in stillness. Arms lifted. Head bowed. Shadow bowed too. Silence. Then a single clap. Then another. Then the sound of everyone standing at once. Thunderous applause crashed across the garden. People shouted. What? Reached forward as if hoping to catch the final trace of her motion. But she was already leaving. She turned, walking with that same impossible grace, and exited into shadow. Before anyone could stop her. Lady Myra sat frozen. Mirren looked pale. Lisa whispered, I think I know. But no one moved. In the hours that followed, judges tried to find her. Pages searched. Servants asked every inn, every alley. She was gone. All that remained was a single silk ribbon left on the stage, black with a thread of silver, tied into a knot none could undo. The name, Dancer in Shadow, was etched in gold that evening on the festival's ledger. Though she had not claimed the prize, it was decided, no one would follow her. To do so would be to ruin perfection. And so she became legend. A phantom who danced not on feet but on memory. Night in the capital held a different kind of silence than the country. It was richer, heavier, like the hush in a cathedral or a breath held before confession. The festival of grace had ended, yet the city pulsed with a strange, lingering energy. No one had forgotten the dancer in shadow. In every tavern and corridor, whispers passed like firelight. She danced without feet. She made the air sing. She disappeared like a ghost. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Word spread that one final performance, unannounced, unofficial, unauthorized, would take place on the eve of the waning moon. In the city's oldest amphitheater, long abandoned to ivy and echoes, a single figure had been seen preparing the stage. No heralds made proclamations. No tickets were sold. Still they came. Hundreds. Then thousands. Drawn like moths. They came with torches, lanterns, eyes wide with hunger and fear. The amphitheater, crumbling and vine-choked, had never seen so many souls. The stone seating groaned under the weight of watchers. The moon was swollen, yellow and low, casting heavy shadows across the dust-covered stage. Then, movement. From the ruins of the old archway she stepped forward. Seren. No veil. No mask. Her hair loose and silver blonde under the moonlight. Her dress was black again, but threaded now with veins of crimson, like wildfire beneath ash. And her feet, still bound in cloth, dark with old stains. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some recognized her instantly. Others stared, stunned, as a girl they thought mutilated, forgotten, or dead stood tall and unbroken. At the back of the amphitheater, Lady Myra rose from her seat with a hiss. Her daughters flanked her, silent, their painted faces pale. "That's not possible," Myra whispered. Her hands clutched the stone rail before her, knuckles bloodless. She's crippled." But then the music began. There was no orchestra. No instrument. The sound came from the shadows, soft at first like breath across glass. Then deeper. A heartbeat. A thrum. A drum not heard but felt. Seren raised her arms. And danced. It began slowly, each movement deliberate, sacred. Her silhouette, stretched long across the cracked stone, mirrored her. Then doubled. Then split again. Shadows bloomed like ink in water. Dozens of Seren shadows sweeping across walls, floor, and even the bodies of the watchers. They moved with a strange fluidity, unbound by gravity or space. Some danced upon the stone. Others climbed the ruined pillars. One even danced upside down along the back wall, arms raised in ecstasy. The crowd gasped, mesmerized. But it was only the beginning. As Seren spun, the shadows changed. Some were no longer hers. A new figure emerged among them, tall, sharp, cold. Lady Myra. Her shadow, vast and unmistakable, appeared across the amphitheater wall, carved by moonlight and memory. It did not stand still. It moved, grotesque, jerky, mimicking old cruelties. A hand raised to strike. A back turned in disdain. A figure looming over a cowering girl. The crowd murmured, confused. Then Seren's shadow reached toward it, and danced with it. Not tenderly but fiercely. A confrontation in movement. Step for step her shadow opposed Myra's. Their battle was silent but thunderous, a war of gestures, a duet of defiance. And still more shadows emerged. Two others almost identical, the stepsisters. Lisa and Miran. Their silhouettes giggled, mocked, pointed. They danced too, not with grace but with mockery. And then their shadows turned on each other, claws out, teeth bared, locked in a swirl of vanity and spite. The crowd began to shift uncomfortably. Laughter faded. And then, with a slow, sickening lurch, Lady Myra's shadow looked back at her. Not the dancer's conjuration, her real shadow. It turned. On its own. Gasps rippled like lightning. Myra clutched her chest. No, no. Her own shadow rose like a storm behind her, stretching taller, darker, thicker than it should have under the moon. It no longer mirrored her, it watched her. Its fingers twitched independently. Its posture mocked hers. It stepped away from her body. And bowed. To Seren. Lady Myra screamed. "Witch!" she shrieked, pointing with trembling fingers. "She's cursed. Someone stop her." But no one moved. The crowd was paralyzed. Not by fear. By awe. They watched as shadows flooded the stage. Not just Seren's. Not just Myra's. Everyone's. Their own silhouettes seemed to lean forward, stretch out, reaching toward Seren like pilgrims. Some sobbed. Others trembled. The shadows danced even when their owners did not move. Truth made visible. Memory set free. And then the firelight came. From the back, torches flared. Red-orange light bled into the silver of the moon, creating a surreal glow. Seren's dress caught the firelight and glowed as though embroidered in ember. She danced into the flame's edge, unburnt. And her shadow danced through the fire. She spun, faster now, arms wide, feet gliding, bleeding. And her shadow towered, 20 feet high, a goddess of movement wreathed in light and dark. The shadow turned, faced Lady Myra, and pointed. The gesture was not violent. Not loud. But it was final. Lady Myra shrieked again, a sound that cracked. She backed away, stumbling over her own gown. Her daughters held her, but she swatted them away. "Make it stop," she sobbed. "She's in my head, she's in my shadow." But the shadow only watched. And Myra's face twisted. Something inside her broke. The wall she had built of pride and cruelty cracked. The shape of her sins now stood before everyone, reflected, undeniable. She turned to run. Her own shadow did not follow. It remained, frozen on the wall, arms outstretched like chains. And she fled into the night, howling, barefoot, lost. No one followed. Saren, breathless, slowed her dance. Her arms lowered. Her spinning ceased. She stood still. The fire behind her roared. Her shadow, now glowing, slowly knelt. And bowed. The amphitheater was silent again. Saren looked across the crowd, their faces lit in gold and fear. And then she turned. Walked to the edge of the stage. And stepped into shadow. The torches flickered. The moon dimmed behind a cloud. And she was gone. No trace. No scent. Not even a footprint. Only a single thread of black silk fluttered from the stone edge. No one spoke for a long time. Eventually the crowd dispersed, not out of boredom but reverence. They moved as though leaving a church. Some wept. Others clutched each other in silence. The amphitheater stood still. Empty, except for the shadows, which remained just a moment longer than they should have before, slowly, gently returning to their masters. By morning the ruins were quiet again. But stories spread like wildfire. Of a dancer who performed without music. Of a shadow that remembered what people tried to forget. Of a reckoning not with blades but with truth. Of a girl who had no toes, but danced anyway. Because her soul had never stopped. Long after the moonlight performance the world moved on, as it always does. The amphitheater crumbled further into ruin. Ivy overtook the stones. Birds made nests in the rafters, and moss softened the steps where thousands had once held their breath. But the story lingered. It traveled by whisper, by firelight, by the hush between mother and child. In inns and marketplaces, in letters and lullabies the tale grew, embroidered, embellished, made luminous by belief. They called her different names. Some said she was a spirit born from sorrow, a daughter of the moon. Others believed she was the last priestess of a forgotten god, keeper of a sacred dance older than language. A few insisted she was simply a girl, flesh and blood, broken and made whole again by her own will. But all agreed on this. She had no toes. And still she danced. Always by moonlight. Never by day. Witnesses swore they saw her atop hills in frost-covered fields, beside lakes still as mirrors. Always barefoot. Always casting shadows that moved more freely than her body, shadows that spun faster, reached further, and sometimes gently bowed. They said you could not chase her. Only stumble upon her. And only if your heart was quiet. Some scoffed. Some prayed. Most simply watched the night differently after hearing the tale, studying shadows with a little more reverence, a little more fear. Years passed. In a small village on the edge of the northern forest, where the trees grew ancient and the wind remembered names, a child wandered too far from her home. Her name was Elia, a quiet girl with scuffed shoes and knees green from grass. She danced when no one watched. Her mother laughed it off. A phase, she said. A twitch of the feet. Elia didn't have friends. Not the kind you could hold. But she had rhythm. And dreams. One evening, as dusk spilled violet across the sky, Elia slipped past the orchard fence and followed a path of crushed petals into the woods. She didn't know why. Only that something was humming, softly, just beyond hearing. The forest opened into a clearing she'd never seen. At its center sat a stone, flat and round, dappled with lichen. And atop it, a pair of ballet shoes. Worn, soft, gray with age. Threadbare ribbons. One sole slightly torn. Elia stepped forward, heart thudding. The shoes seemed to breathe in the fading light. Something in her, something old, whispered, "Put them on." She did. The ribbons curled around her ankles as if they remembered how. She stood. The air held its breath. Then gently her shadow began to move. It lifted one arm. Then another. It bowed. And twirled. Elia gasped. Her feet did not move. But her shadow danced. It spun and leapt, free and fluid, casting graceful shapes against the mossy trees. It moved in ways she never had, ways she didn't know she could. She laughed. And the shadow laughed too, not with sound but with motion. A joy older than memory. A wind stirred the leaves. Somewhere far off music rose, soft, sad and sweet. When Elia finally slipped off the shoes, the clearing grew still again. The wind stopped. The shadow returned to its shape. But she was different now. She had felt it. Magic. She didn't take the shoes with her. She left them on the stone. And ran home barefoot, heart pounding like a drum. She would return. She knew it. The story would begin again. Because somewhere once a girl had danced on shadow. And shadows, like stories, remember?